Welcome to Thoughts with Sara.
So day 2 of the Instagram challenge. It's your signature reel. So signature series. So I decided to use a signature series called Thoughts with Sara. So it's going to go over my experiences. Experiences that I never thought of putting out there or concluding as, my findings. So let's start. Okay, so the first signature series is about alcohol. Alcohol and drugs. Let's just put it out there. And when I mean drugs, I mean psychedelics, okay? I'm not talking about anything you shoot in your nose, in your veins. I'm talking about psychedelics that you smoke or you digest, you ingest. So when it comes to drugs and alcohol, and again, when I mean drugs and alcohol, I'm talking about the clean drugs and alcohol. I'm talking about whatever that's provided from nature, by nature to us humans. Okay, let's be very specific. I'm not going into the hardcore stuff here. So the reason why I was fascinated with this topic growing up is I understand how, and again, this is my individual experience. So I understand how there's some households where there's people that drink and become violent. They drink and become horrible human beings. I believe that there's an underlying issue with those types of characters. So I'm not talking about the people that drink and smoke weed or marijuana and become evil people. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the people that you tend to see, the everyday person that when they drink or smoke or ingest psychedelics, they become more of themselves. They become jolly and more loose and more of themselves. Okay? So this was my experience when I'm talking about drugs and alcohol, alcohol and drugs. It's with the jolly people. Like, of course, if I, went to a party and I saw somebody get violent after drinking, I wouldn't stay there. That has never happened, by the way. But if that would happen, I wouldn't stay there. So I can assure you that for somebody that has partied a lot, most parties are a lot of fun. People loosen up with drugs and alcohol. People tend to open up and be more themselves when they're on psychedelics or when they're drinking alcohol. And again, I'm talking about homemade alcohol, psychedelics you can grow in your backyard, okay? I'm not talking about the laced stuff. I'm not talking about crack cocaine that you could find in Skid Row. I'm not talking about heroin. These are not the drugs I'm talking about, okay? Making that perfectly clear that I'm talking about the natural stuff. The natural stuff, with my experience, I've noticed that they bring a lot of joy to people. So growing up with three brothers, I had all three brothers were all different from each other. One of them was like a really good drummer, like almost professional level drummer, and I had another one that was professional level guitar player. The middle brother was more of a manual construction, engineer type of brother, which loved to listen to music, and I did both. I listened to music and played instruments. So my oldest brother, the one that played drums, he was always like the Fonz. He was the coolest brother. He was always an entrepreneur. Like I've never seen this guy work for anybody. He always worked for himself. And he was always like his own whole person. And he intrigued me a lot growing up. So he would be able to down a whole bottle of vodka on his own and still walk a straight line and have a very normal conversation with a person. And I remember that intrigued me because I had one brother that couldn't even handle a drink. He would get a headache after two drinks. And my middle brother, he was okay. He was able to handle his alcohol very well. But my oldest brother, he was what we call a professional drinker. He would be a professional, a musician, and he would drink and play all night. And I remember would have these, music parties, and there were a lot of fun. But there would be a lot of substances, like that, and people would open up. So I'm basically saying all of this to say that growing up, the reason why this fascinated me is because I notice it is a spirit that you're taking in when you're drinking. Absolutely. But I believe that it's a spirit that amplifies your own spirit. Like, you're not going to be a super jolly person and then drink alcohol and become super evil. Like, I don't believe it's an exorcist spirit that comes and takes over. That I don't believe. You're not opening yourself to exorcism, like, unless you are already at that level and you drink, then it'll amplify. But if you're like a jolly person that loves to play music and dance, I'm telling you, these people, when they drink, they don't become mean or evil spirited. They just become like professional entertainers and 100% in their flow. There's nothing blocking these people from their creativity. And again, I'm not talking about the crash. I'm talking about the high level of the party where everyone's warmed up and ready to go no matter what embarrassment is waiting for them. So I always notice that, to me, he was the professional level. He was like the professional tolerance of alcohol. Not only that he had mastered it on a physical sense, alcohol didn't bother him anymore. And this was gradual. And this, I remember, I almost got to that level myself. I was drinking a lot at some point in my life. And it's a tolerance. You become better at it. And I'm not encouraging this. Listen, I'm not saying my higher self told me go this way, okay? I want to be very specific. My higher self had nothing to do with this. And when it comes to things like this, your higher self disappears. Like, if you're on a crossroad and you have to make a decision, trust me, your higher self isn't going to, nudge you towards the right decision. When it comes to crucial decisions, that's free will. That is 100% up to you. Like, whenever I would go to these parties, like, I knew something can go wrong. Like, I was on the alert because I knew that I'm risking it by going to these events and getting drunk and this and that. I knew I was putting my life in danger. So I knew I had to be extra alert as a consequence because my guides can't do anything. When you're going under the influence in parties and there's music and people and crowd, listen, there's just so much nudging your, spirit guides can do. And I believe that's how you black out. And I have blacked out. And thank you for Jacob for saving me. I blacked out at a club, and Jacob, my friend Rebecca's then husband, had just picked me up and walked out of the club with me and her, and we all left because I was in no condition. But I remember I had mixed alcohol and smoking together, which was not a good combination, and my spirit left my body. I remember I blacked out. My spirit was like, I can't take it anymore. And it left. And I don't blame my spirit, And I remember, like like I said before, a few times has happened where I told myself I'm not gonna drink like that, and then I noticed that it's not a question of cutting cold, because I know people that have gone 10 years sober, 20 years sober, and props to them. Props to them. And I know these people, if they take one drink, it's over. Okay, so this is not to judge. And it's not because they're weak or this and that. Hey, some people's mission is not to come here and drink and boost their tolerance to the level to see how far they can take it. That's not everyone's purpose. I was just curious to see how come some people's tolerances are like incredible and some people's aren't. And my conclusion is this: they mastered the spirit that comes in through the alcohol. They've mastered the spirit that comes in through, the psychedelic. When you master the spirit that comes in, trust me when I tell you, that's a stronger level. It's like a Nintendo game, right? You have the regular level for, normal people. Then you have the difficult level, just like a hike session. You have the difficult hike and the regular hike, right? So life is the same way. You have difficult levels and you have normal levels. So I can do my life normal level, right? Which means I grow up, I go to school, I find a good job, I find security. That's normal level. I make it. And I fulfill my normal level, duties. However, I can decide to make it difficult. And this is what happened to me at some point. When you go grocery shopping for 10 years on your own, all alone, all the time, grocery shopping starts to be redundant and boring. So, at some point I was like, let me light one up and go grocery shopping and make it more fun because it is more difficult. First you're in there for like an hour or two instead of being in there for 15 minutes. Everything is more complicated. Everything's more, now you got to read the ingredients. Everything's taking slow, more time. I remember, but it would make my grocery shopping fun. It would make it more interesting because I was so bored going grocery shopping. So I was doing it on purpose to increase the level of difficulty for this task. Because I was like, all right, I'm doing this on automatic. Now let's increase it. And I've noticed I did that. Like I would go into jobs, and at first I was 100% alert. And once I automated the jobs, I would go under the influence to the office. Sometimes, not all the time. But in California, it's legal. You can buy that stuff everywhere, on your lunch break, whatever. You go back, you take a gummy, you go back, and, boom, it hits you. So, but that's the thing. If you can go through life at that level, to me, it's like you're professional. And this is why it always intrigued me, people that were able to drink and do hard alcohol and drugs and still have a very successful life. To me, they've done it at a very difficult level. And this is why I respect people that, have done heroin and got off of it, because a lot of people haven't. So the people that are out there giving their stories of how they, got rid of such an addiction like heroin, trust me when I tell you that is like a very difficult level to, recover from. So if they've recovered it, they are spiritual masters. And this is how I always saw these people. I've seen people that can tolerate all kinds of substances. I would see them as spiritual masters. There's a lot of people that go and do ayahuasca, and ayahuasca lasts like a good 5 to 8 hours. Once you drink that, I personally did it 3 times, but I see people on the internet doing that a lot. And like, I understand you want to master the spirit. The first time you do ayahuasca, maybe you freak out. You see dragons, you see snakes, you see this, you see that. It's very possible the first time you freak out. But once you do it a lot like that, eventually it doesn't, the impact isn't as strong. So there's tolerance with everything. And it's a question of what is your tolerance. And again, we're not judging. Some people have zero tolerance. I know some people, they take one smoke and they have a headache. It's not for them. And other people, they take one smoke and they're in heaven. So it's not for everybody. But I wanted to share my thoughts to demonstrate people that, hey, listen, if you've come across somebody that has overcome an addiction and they're thriving in life, trust me when I tell you, they're a powerful spiritual being to have been able to overcome that level of difficulty and still thrive. So, I have respect for these people. It's not because they went to, Alcohol Anonymous or Drugs Anonymous that there are certain, class in certain societies. To me, they've always been intriguing, and this is why. Because they have hit a level that most people haven't hit. They have succeeded a difficult level that most people cannot pass and succeed. So, I thought this was interesting to share. Food for thought. So, drink responsibly, do psychedelics responsibly. There's no reason why we should attack these things. But again, it's the middle point of everything. People tend to take things too far. And that works with alcohol. It works with, weed. It works with mushrooms. Anything you take too far, you're not going to feel good. So it's not a question of doing too much. It's a question of balancing with your tolerance. Now on to the next one. So thank you for listening to my signature series.